Welcome to In the MYX. I'm Abby Brody. When we're in the mix, we're having real conversations about higher education. Higher education is rapidly changing, and it needs to meet the demands of today and tomorrow. This is a conversation we all need to be a part of. So come join us as we get into the mix. Hello, we're back in the mix. Abby Brody here. I could not be more excited about our guest today because he's legendary and goes by so many names. CEO, serial entrepreneur, trend spotter, media expert, and the list goes on. It is the one and the only Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. That was very sweet. How have you been?
Good. I want you to know, though, it's incorrect because that intro is lacking a very important name for you. I'm going to let you know as an educator that you are one too. So from now on, you are Professor V in the mix.
Thank you. You're very sweet. You know, it's funny. I sit on the board of Pencils of Promise. I believe in education. The tweet I posted right before coming on here, this is super ironic, wasn't even thinking, was before you get into NFTs, get educated, right? So I'm education, both in like the way I think a lot of people talk about it, but then also in the mindset way that I get a lot of pleasure out of, which is like when you start changing people's perspective, when you start really leaning into emotional intelligence conversations. I believe opening your mind, hearing, and my whole life has been predicated on hearing something that changed my perspective, right? All of us are, from the way we're parented to schooled. And so it's funny because I know I'm positioned as someone who puts out a lot of content of like, screw you college for doing this, but education is an incredible passion of mine. I do think that there's a lot of conversation needed to be had around how it's packaged and sold, executed, but I appreciate that, and I in the last 3 to 5 years have realized that about myself, and it's been a great revelation, because I had a very difficult relationship with school, and in hindsight, and I'm like it's funny, I disproportionately dislike complaining because I think accountability leads to so much good, but I'm not confused that my lack of success in the education system is a systematic one for people that learn differently. And it's a worthwhile conversation.
You are not alone. And I know you're not alone because people actually come to you a lot. Parents and students come to talk to you about this. But before we dive into what education is, because I think you really nailed on something, it's not just college. You could get education. Education is the sharing of knowledge in a way that you can process it and make meaning. That could come just next door from your neighbor or, in a working environment. You can learn from all around you. Tell us about that education story of yours, though. Everyone is a product of education. Let's go back in time. Tell us about why it didn't work for you and how that all went down.
I think there's a lot there. And it's funny, as you were talking, I was thinking about like the education that happens on the streets, and you hear about that a lot, right? You hear a lot about, I learned a lot outside. And then there's people that grew up in even much more difficult neighborhoods and circumstances. And the streets taught me is something you hear. And a lot of those people go on to be quite savvy, happy, and successful in life. I was an incredibly good student from kindergarten to second grade. I was born in the former Soviet Union. My mom was an incredible student. She was a stay-at-home mom. So, that was her framework. I would like to say at this point in my life, I feel comfortable that I was gifted with smarts. And so the early stuff came extremely easy for me, memorization, things of that nature. But somewhere around third grade, there was a little bit of a shift. Like I remember in second grade winning all the flashcards. We had this great game. I don't know if they still do this. It was like a flashcard game of multiplication, and you would like go up against a kid and you try to go around the world, right?
This is still done.
I was dominant in it, especially one day. It was around sevens, and at that point I was already a crazy football fan. So my 7, 14, 21, 28 was on point. I just cleaned I even beat Michael Wong. Big shout out Michael Wong. If you're out there, Edison, New Jersey, Martin Luther King Elementary School. I even beat him on the sevens day, and he was a beast. Third grade, it started to shift, and it's like a tidal wave sometimes for these kids. And I don't know, I definitely have reading comprehension issues, which I've become much more in tune with in the last couple of years. As I've gotten busier, I've realized, why do I always call these 5-minute meetings? Wait a minute, it's because I can't read this email. I just can't. And so it's been interesting to kind of go through this journey, but it happened fast. I went from like really good in second grade to being done, checked out by fourth grade. It was over. It was already over.
Ride still ahead of you. I mean, if you're checking out in third grade, that's not going to be fun. You got to.
And it got bad fast. I mean, I became a pretty significant, consistent D and F student from probably fourth grade on through high school. And so it was interesting. It was interesting for a lot of reasons. I was very, in hindsight, I was a very extreme, it makes sense to me why my life is what it is. I was very unusual. I was an immigrant, which is not so unusual, but and I think a lot of immigrants can associate with this. My mom was incredibly non-active in my academia. So what I learned later in my life was she was kind of embarrassed about her accent, and it kept her to a very small circle. And so like even going to school, I think she also, in a very different angle, my mom very much knew the whole time that everything was going to be okay in a real way. Like and she's not a Monday morning quarterback. I recall it. I could feel it. I sensed it as a child that she thought I would be okay. Now that's because also while, by the time I was in first grade, I was very, very entrepreneurial, like extreme. I mean, entrepreneurship wasn't even a thing then, as you know. Now it is a thing, and still by even today's standards where kids do a lot of stuff, I was off the reservation. Snow, shoveling for money. Summer, selling lemonade. Like it was just, washing cars, like selling baseball cards. Like it was 90, 70, 80% of my leisure time was business. And so it was so extreme that I think my mom, by the time I was 11, 12, when you're making $500, $700, $900 a weekend at a baseball card show, this is the 80s and 90s. Those were like real numbers. Now the world is like out of control and it's trillions and billions, but like it was meaningful money. And I was a good person and I was happy. And I had a ton of self-esteem, like no teacher. And teachers, the 80s were far less politically correct. I mean, teachers said things like, you're stupid. Like it was different. It was different. I was in a blue collar environment my whole life. And it was the 80s and early 90s. And so far less politically correct. And you're never going to go anywhere. And I'm disappointed in you. And you're going to be a failure and you'll never succeed.
Yeah, you'll check these boxes and get these grades. It's over.
But it was interesting. It was never delivered with venom because I was so likable to my, I'm very respectful, so I was taught to be like, respect my elders. So I didn't really disrespect my teachers, or I was the ultimate disrespect. I was so convinced by 10, 11, 12 that I would be a businessman that I was indifferent, which I'm sure a challenge for, teachers. The level of, I don't give a shit, I'll show you, that I was rolling through at that part of my life was pretty funny in hindsight. Like at the time it seemed normal to me, but like, I wish I could watch some of the videos I wish there was video of me in 6th, 7th, 8th grade of like, just like unbelievable conviction that I was going to be okay, even though everybody outside of my mother was telling me I wasn't going to be.
But you had so many reasons, as someone who's taught so many children, and especially in elementary education, I see this all the time. That third grade time is a moment where learning loses its meaning.
Interesting.
From K to 2, you have to read and write and those things, and you understand, and it's empowering. Like I could read that street sign. I can get from here to there. But then they start throwing out information that you see no reason and cause of knowing it. And without meaning behind learning, it's meaningless. And the fact that you were able to have that entrepreneur and have those, you had the school of life. You were out there at a young age. And, you know, at MYX, we're really famous for saying, why is it school, then life? Why do we keep our kids?
Makes no sense. It makes no sense. I mean, I sit here today as a very accomplished businessman and still don't have certain financial, tax, legal foundations. I don't.
Yeah. No.
If I took a class in 5th grade that said why New Coke failed, I would have got a straight A.
Well, you know, and that, but 96% of college graduates cannot pick out insurance plans. They look at that and they go, Mom, Dad, like all you.
And by the way, the entrepreneurs, 96% of us, I can't either. Like, to me, what struck me a couple of years ago as this conversation became more mature in the way that I communicated it and was involved in it, because as I built an audience in the last 5 years and said the things that I said, I've engaged with tens of thousands. Let me say that slowly for everybody who's listening. Tens of thousands of parents who are not happy with me. And I said engaged. I get hundreds of thousands, and maybe at this point even millions of reach outs to fuck you, you know, which I'm incredibly empathetic to. I understand.
They're coming from fear.
They're coming from fear.
Yeah. No
question. Mm-hmm. And like an ideology that is grounded in very old data.
Very old.
And yeah. So I've had a very mature conversation around this issue, much more than most things in my life. I started getting resentful, which is rare for me, of just a wasted time. I started thinking, my God, if in 3rd grade I went to business school, quote unquote, for those 12 years, and even if I was taught, because I think business is very much like sports, you got to play it.
Mm-hmm. But I'd be in it.
But I'm mad that in my mid-30s, I learned how to carry people's money, meaning I could raise money and get 20%. Like when I knew Facebook, this is real. I want everybody to hear this because this may surprise people. At 34 years old, I knew that Facebook was going to rule the world. And I invested $200,000 that I had, which was like almost my life savings at the time. If I was deemed with the education, the simple notion that you could take somebody else's money and do an SPV, I would have went to every rich person, which I knew a lot at that point because I was selling high-end wine, and I would have been petrified to lose their money, but I had 100%, not 99, Ab, 100% conviction. And I would have made them an ungodly amount of money, and I would have done well. And I was 34 and did not know that. Mm-hmm. And so what really upsets me is people don't know tax law. People don't know, how to be strategic around buying a plot for their, like things in life, like plot for their death, for like little things, like common sense life. Like if I could have been on a common sense life track from 3rd to 12th grade, it would have been life-changing for me. And I'm sad that doesn't exist.
I agree. I mean, when you think about college time, when the student's on the campus in college, and higher ed is a lot more than college. Let's focus on college for a second. 8% time of that money is actually spent in the classroom. 8%. So we're talking about what is going on in the other 92%. And why aren't we filling the gap there by creating and incubating our youth with skills that they need, from basic contract law so they could sign their lease agreement, and understanding money. I mean, personal finance, it's just a small select group that rule the world that understand it. And the rest of us are never given the opportunity to learn it. And
well, it's funny. I think we're given the opportunity to learn it by ourselves. So I think a lot about accountability. I could have Googled, investment strategies. I could have. So I don't get like crazy, like the world fucked me. It just doesn't make any sense in any shape or form that there are not dramatically more options from 6 to 22.
Well, the good news is that higher education is getting a shakeup. I mean, it is happening now. I think you were one of the people who said it to me in a previous conversation, that the internet has disrupted everything.
100%.
But education was pretty slow to roll. And I understand why. As educators, we're the vessels of knowledge. And the fact that these kids can Google it, like, what is our purpose?
I think it's because it's been religion in modern societies. It's like, let there be no confusion. Education as we know it today in America and many, many parts of the world is a lot closer to believing in God than it is many other things. It is just fundamentally insane if you knew somebody in modern America say, I'm not sending my kid to school. Not homeschooling. I'm talking not. That would blow people's mind. And I actually think it's wildly intriguing as a conversation.
Well, this educator is going to be very clear. I believe in the power of education. Okay.
Same.
It opens doors. It's just
Same.
there's other pathways. And that's the problem. The other pathways are getting no airtime because of this religion. Right.
It's religion.
Based on fear.
It's religion, it's social status. You know how much passion we've talked about this. My passion around the bullshit that parents want to throw a fucking Brown or Yale or Harvard sticker on their BMW. And that drives so much of all their behavior on how they navigate their child's life, which is literally the judgment of their peers. It breaks my soul. It breaks my soul.
So Gary, we have an opportunity. I mean, the MYX is doing it. We're remixing, taking what we understand, of how people learn, which is by doing the lemonade stand, bringing it back to the lemonade stand, putting them out, giving them also, we haven't talked about the need of purpose. I talked about how it's school, then life. So it's school versus life, but the two go hand in hand. Education should help find your purpose, and your purpose should also help shape the education you seek to find. If you had to remix it, right, and create the educational system that you think would help save and bring forth the next generation of change makers that we so need, what does it look like?
It needs a massive collective conversation. That's what it needs.
Who's at the table?
I think first and foremost, we're living through the greatest era of lack of accountability of parenting that I've ever seen. And I study shit.
It's funny that you say that because, many educators, we talk about parents as helicopters. Accountability seems to be all that they're worried about. So tell us more what you mean by that.
On themselves. They want to hold the educators accountable. They want to hold politicians accountable. I'm talking about accountability on themselves. Like this notion that you can take your kid out of that school. You can homeschool them. You can take their cell phone away. Like Instagram's killing my kid. Don't let them be on it. Like you don't let your kid do heroin. I think
the other kids are doing it, Gary.
Oh, I know why everybody gets a phone in New York City in 4th grade or 3rd grade. I think most parents lack courage. And I get it because I have children. Like you love them so much, any level of pain destroys you. What we've done is we've demonized adversity. So much of the mental health issues have nothing to do with social media. They have to do with parents have eliminated losing.
Mm-hmm. Everyone gets a gold star. Right?
It's a major issue. Like the fact that parents go to fancy schools and non-fancy schools and try to fight for their kid to get a B instead of a C is the funniest shit of all time.
It really doesn't matter.
Oh God, it means nothing. And what it means when it's devastating, and this is what I mean by that, and somehow through donation, leverage, social status, monies, politics, they're able to change it. All you're teaching your kids is they're not capable of standing on their own 2 feet and mommy and daddy have to fight for them 24/7. So I think that there is real lack of pointing thumbs at way too much fingers, meaning parents need to do a lot more of this and a lot less of this, right? And, I think who's got to be at the table? Parents. Fucking parents.
Absolutely.
Like,
and the student, let's add the student. We are here for the student. Let's hear what they're looking for out of their education. What are the things they want to learn, and what are the things that will help them be the best they are? Let's talk about for a second, Gary, about what does matter. You know, we talked about the B's, the C's, that doesn't matter. But what do you think, as someone who gives a lot of advice and also someone who hires talent at Vayner, you know, what are the skills that you're looking for? What matters today?
I'm extremely passionate. Look, everybody gets to define what matters. So this is just one man's humble point of view. I'm obsessed with inner human capabilities.
Tell us more. Inner human capabilities.
My intrigue around kind candor, around compassion, around empathy, around soft skills, EQ, is huge. It's huge.
And ironically, those are probably the skills that are least likely to be taught in a classroom of four walls.
It's why when I find someone who has it, I talk a lot to them about their parenting. How are they parented? You know, I've long flirted to my community through the years of writing a book called Perfectly Parented, which is a book from a human who's now 45 years old, from his perspective of how his parents did what they did and why and how and what it meant and what it is. And I really, really want to write the book. I just have I feel like it's almost so big that I myself, who's the king of just like go, 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 am maybe treating it too precious. So I haven't gotten there, and I'm trying to convince myself right now to get over it. But what I think is very obvious to me is that when you just ask that question, who needs to be at the table? Mm-hmm. It's funny to me how empty that table was. And I couldn't agree more and understand what you say about the kid, but this stuff starts early. Yeah. An 18-year-old grown-up who's allowed to go and fight a war should more than welcome, in my opinion, be able to pick her or his school. How many 18-year-olds have the environment in their four walls from their parents where their parents have made them feel safe to make an actual call that they want to make versus a parent imposing their subjective point of view is unfortunately extremely rare. Yeah. You know, teachers are robots. And it breaks my heart to say that. My sister's a teacher. There's incredible teachers. Teacher. Like you're, and when I say a robot, it's the same thing as being an employee at VaynerMedia. Let me make this very clear where I'm going with this. I struggle to get upset at teachers because I have too much compassion for the game that they're stuck playing. Mm-hmm. They are held accountable for, and teachers have mortgages and families and responsibilities. So who am I to ask a teacher to completely break out of a system that will create vulnerability for their life in lieu of them doing a better job teaching me? I can't ask that. I'm not joking. I'm being dead serious with you. Yeah. So we have systematic vulnerabilities, and it starts with recognizing, whether consciously or subconsciously or unconsciously, this system was created to not benefit the individuals that go through it.
I mean, the statistics tell us that, right? From our research, only 14% of students leave higher ed using their degree, employed, and not in serious debt.
And by the way, that number of 14 is going to look like 7 in about 4 seconds. The world is doing things too fast. Yeah. And the system of making money, and notice the words I'm choosing, the system that makes money in selling education is getting away with religion. Parents are not holding higher ed accountable.
And higher ed's not holding itself accountable to its
It's not incentivized to.
Right. But that's all changing, as we know. And there are some really exciting things. And one thing that breaks my heart is we're seeing actual pathways open up that never existed. It was college or not college. And then once you were in college, you're on this conveyor belt of 4 credits at this, 3 credits at that. Again, going back to Gary in 3rd grade, being like, what's the meaning of this? How does this work for me? We're seeing choices. And we're seeing the private sector now jump in, which is really exciting.
Well, by the way, listen, I am a capitalist. I think that the modern America capitalist game has plenty of flaws. I always have more confidence in the private sector, even though I'm always concerned that it will go too far. And I do think the private sector has a disproportionate chance of fixing things. And when I say fixing things, there's no such thing as fixing things. It's more about just creating options.
Mm-hmm.
But, and you know this, and we've spoken about this privately, until the religion of college in America and many other modern societies is not debated much more fruitfully, all we're doing is scratching the surface. This is religion.
I will say this, Gary, that I think will make you happy. Gen Z and their parents feel very differently about education than previous generations.
That makes me happy.
It does. They're really, Gen Z is pushing the envelope. They're saying, I demand more. I demand a return on investment, right? You're hearing them take it out in the streets.
You know, it's funny. I feel like Gen Z, of course not in every circumstance, but is so likely to have levels of entitlement because of how prosperous society is. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking the other day, I was like, I hope that their entitlement actually is used in the positive of tearing down this bullshit. Because when I hear you say they're demanding, and you see it, right? Like, this, you run in these kind of circles as well, so you'll definitely associate with this. The 15-year-old girl, more often than not, is now a mom's friend, not her daughter.
Yeah.
And what that does is it's creating a really interesting shift in balance of power. We've got it, the youthification obsession of the 38 to 62-year-old mom and dad has created something we've never seen before, where kids have grandparents are snickering, great-grandparents are rolling in their graves by the way children speak to parents.
Mm-hmm. My own kid just, is starting to call me Abby. So I am hearing this.
You are hearing this. So,
and he's only 10.
And so to that point, there's a lot of people that are old school valued that hate it. I understand. I worry about it because I think kids are growing up in a way where they're entitled and don't think they should stand on their own 2 feet, which really bothers me and I think leads to a lot of unhappiness. Mm-hmm. I encourage any kid who's listening here who's of 22 years or older, if you are taking a penny from your parents, you're in a bad spot. And I'm not throwing judgment. I'm trying to explain to you that, and I say this a lot and I get destroyed. Kids hit me up left and right, fuck you. And I'm like, look, you don't need to take Uber everywhere. You don't need a $4 Starbucks. You don't need that apartment. You could get a roommate in a shittier apartment. I hope you understand that when you take money from mommy and daddy at 23 years old, you're giving up leverage. You're creating a very unhealthy dynamic.
Which will make it much harder when life hits you in the face. And it does.
And by the way, let me tell you something. Life is hitting those kids in the face at dinner tables when dad makes a snarky comment because parents resent. Or parents love. Let me explain. Parents either resent that their kid's doing that, so they make the snarky comment because one of the parents isn't aligned with the other parent and they're underwriting the kid's life. Or parents love it because they know they have the leverage. And as long as the kid's on the payroll, they feel that they can tell the kid what to do, and the kid's vulnerable because consciously or subconsciously, they know mommy and daddy can take away that dollar and that nice apartment or that Uber or that Equinox membership, or just even a $5,000 loan, or even like $20 because everyone's in different economic levels. It's just not good. You can't paint me the picture of how it's good.
I so appreciate you coming on, and I know we're limited on your time, but I just want to end by saying I'm hopeful.
Me too.
I'm an optimist. I think actually you are as well. Like
big time.
I have never seen higher education. The value proposition has been broken for the student for a while, but now the value proposition is broken on the institution, and we're going to see some changes. And this is the first time where students should feel empowered. If you're a listening student, you are coming to education in an incredible time where you can personalize it, make it yours, curate it for your dime, and for a way that you can become a life-ready individual.
Look, Look, I'm sorry I have to run. I didn't realize how over my
No.
prior meetings yelling at me. I'll leave it with this. I'm so busy in my life. There are so few things that can get me involved. You have compelled me with your ambition around something I have passion for. I cheer for you heavy. And I hope everybody who's listening here realizes this is an important time. We are going from ABC to Netflix. We're going from Toyota to Tesla. We're going from, MySpace to TikTok. Like, this is a time in education.
It's now, and it's overwhelming. And I just want to talk to the parent student head on right now. We recognize that this is confusing. You've been told the narrative you're going to go on all your life. That narrative may not work for you. You might be the 7% that we're talking about, right?
100%. Yeah, I got to run. I love you. Finish it off.
Gary,
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
So that was Gary. We are so happy to have him on, and we will keep mixing it up with people like Gary and even you students and parents. We're going to bring you on to continue this conversation so that you know that you have choices, that yes, education has issues, but they're getting better. And the MYX is here with you. So thanks for joining me.